Good evening. I hope you're well tonight. Another weekend of sunshine in Wales and another weekend when our police forces were dealing with visitors who'd travelled unnecessarily, despite the very clear message that Wales is still in lockdown. But for those living in England, the rules may well be confusing because there people are allowed to travel more freely. Our correspondent Hannah Thomas spent the weekend with officers on patrol.
For the 8th weekend in a row, Dyfed-Powys police were stopping tourists in the Brecon Beacons, and near Ystrad Fellter they met Ben Mitchell, who didn't know Wales was still locked down and didn't know about devolution.
So even though Boris says you can do what you want, go where you want.
Yeah, that's England.
But don't we control England as well? That's Wales as well. Because it doesn't state nothing on the news you cannot drive it. And then to end up getting a fine, you should really just be like, mate, and we should be like, all right, no worries, turn around and go home. Wasted 2.5 hours.
Ben wanted to see the waterfalls.
So yeah, it's my wetsuit. Feel like there's no one up here, you know? You just feel like you're on your own, out the way, no matter, you sort of thing, you know? It's just lovely.
Officers began their day at Storey Arms and handed out 12 fines in 2 hours.
Well, when officers arrived here this morning, they came across a family of 4 from Birmingham. They had parked up on the side of the road and they were heading to climb over this orange fence and head for the hills of Pen y Fan.
Then they met 2 friends who'd travelled from Bristol to go hiking.
So if tomorrow you decide to go somewhere into England and you're in the same car, you'll both get a fine. It's £120 then. Okay, so I'm trying to advise you. Both persons in the vehicle have been issued with fines today. They also don't live at the same address. They've been given words of advice about being in the same vehicle to try and reduce the spread of the virus.
This man had come from Devon to feed his dog.
Travelling all the way from Devon to here to pick up dog food is not an essential journey.
And this couple were fed up of being stuck indoors.
I've just turned a car around now with an elderly couple in, and I made it very clear that they are unfortunately in that vulnerability group where they should be remaining at home. But I think people are boredom is starting to set in a little bit with people, but we're just pleading with people to stay at home during these times at the time and stay off the road and essential journeys only, really.
This man was from Bridgend. He was given a ticket because he couldn't give police the name and address of his mother-in-law that he said he was taking food to.
How important do you think it is that we stay in because of the coronavirus?
Well, fairly important. I do think it.
Yeah. And so you didn't consider your journey today to be non-essential?
No.
Would you consider doing this again?
If I had to, yeah. Because otherwise you've got no food, there's nobody else can do it.
John Pym is a national park warden, but he too has been impacted by the COVID-19 lockdown.
People who think they should be entitled to walk these hills, you'd say, well, actually, I'm a warden, but even I can't do it.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, we're not allowed to access these places either. So it's closed is closed, and that's to everybody, regardless of whether you're local from away or whether you're actually doing a job like mine.
When the area is reopened, police are telling visitors that they will be welcomed back, but not before lockdown here is lifted. Hannah Thomas, ITV News.
Good evening. Just a few moments ago, Caerphilly County became the first part of Wales to go into a local lockdown. The Welsh Government says it was forced to take action due to a sudden spike in cases, which have been linked to people meeting indoors, not socially distanced, and returning from holidays abroad. These restrictions, people can carry on going to school, they can carry on working. You're working as a journalist in the area, we must say under strict guidelines, so you can safely inform people of what's going on. How has today's news been received by those living in the county who you've been talking to?
I think they're a little bit surprised, to be honest, Andrea, because this affects nearly 200,000 people. I'm in Caerphilly town, you can see the castle here behind me, but actually Caerphilly County is a big county. It stretches all the way from Rumney in the north, all the way to Risca in the south. It's a fairly large local authority, but tonight it's got the gig that nobody wanted, the first in Wales to be put in a local lockdown.
We've barely come out of lockdown and Caerphilly is going back in. Shops and restaurants here haven't long welcomed back their customers. They've been following COVID protection measures, but still the county has seen a spike in cases.
Well, Glanmore's coffee shop opposite the castle has been open for 25 years, but it's only fully reopened after lockdown just over a month ago. Lynn Evans is the owner here. Lynn, you must be worried that you might face another shutdown again.
Well, that's right. It is a big worry. We're only just recovering from the last breakdown. The girls have all come off furlough now. They're not able to go back on it, apparently. So that's not going to be available, you see. So that is a worry, yes.
Have you seen a loss in custom, Lynn, since this local lockdown was announced?
Big difference, yes, big difference. Much, much quieter today. But I think a lot of people seem to think we've closed because they've heard it was locked down. They assume we've closed today because people have been ringing us and saying, are you open?
There are social distancing signs across the town and one-way systems in operation, but some locals want tighter rules on nightlife in particular.
2 or 3 pints into a night in the pub, social distancing flies out of the window in favour of the next 2 pints. So I think social aspects need to be stronger, but overall, pleased.
How do you feel about the fact that Caerphilly has gone back into a local lockdown?
It needed it.
Yeah?
And it's not as bad as I expected. Just seeing it on the news now, I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I think what they've done is very sensible.
How is it a lockdown when you can have people going to the pub, shops, all the different things, even the schools are remaining open, and yet you can't meet, I could meet my son in my home. That's ridiculous.
But pub landlords insist that they're really sticking to protocol.
Everything is in place, also you can get a little bit more stricter on how many people are in one bubble in the pub at one time. Also rather strict on the social distancing, hand sanitizer is at the door and at the bar, track and trace books on the bar.
The first mobile testing unit arrived a few days ago.
Well, such has been the demand for COVID tests in Caerphilly County Borough. A second testing site has opened here today at the council offices in Tredommen, and there's already been a steady stream of people coming to use the facility.
Increased testing has revealed the levels of community transmission, and there are calls for everyone to stay apart and slow the spread of coronavirus.
We've got to find that discipline to keep 2 meters apart, to wash our hands and stick with these 3 restrictions that have been introduced now as well. If we can find that discipline, we can get this under control.
Caerphilly has faced many a battle in its long and checkered history, and beating the rise of COVID-19 is just another.
Easier said than done, though. Well, I'm joined by the leader of Caerphilly County Borough Council, Philippa Marsden. Philippa, you've got the accolade that everyone wanted to avoid.
Absolutely. I don't want to be the first for this type of thing, but I think it's imperative that I get the message across that actually we're facing unprecedented times now in terms of the rise in coronavirus cases on our patch. So for me, this is the right thing to do. This is about putting a fire break in to prevent further the disease passing any further.
How are you going to enforce it, though? That's the key thing.
Yeah, obviously, that's a massively big question. And for us, it's about, obviously, the 5-mile restriction, which was in place, if you remember, from the 23rd of March, and we had it in Wales far longer than the rest of the UK. So absolutely, it's about impressing on people they actually need to do their bit, collectively and individually, to help protect society, and I think that's what we need to do. Gwent Police have put a statement out that they will look into the regulations and do their bit in terms of just questioning people why they're going about their business, why they're leaving the county borough. Again, it's around our environmental health officers, you know, ensuring that social distancing is taking place in all our licensed premises, cafes, bars, you name it. It's really important, isn't it, that, you know, that shops help us adhere to those mask-wearing requests that we set out. The 3 regulations are part measures in stemming the flow and the increase in cases.
I'm glad you said that, because there's a lot of dismay in some parts. I can go, if I lived in Caerphilly tonight, I can go and see my granny in a pub. I can't go and see her at a home. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
Because we can't control what people do inside their homes. In an establishment like a licensed premises, there are strict guidelines that should be adhered to, and, you know, we've got the track and trace protocols in place as well. So actually, in a public house, It is easier to control the social distancing aspect, the bubble incident, in the sense you're staying with a single household. All those measures, they cannot happen in a private household. And I think for us, the cases have been and have come from those environments, the ones that we cannot control once the door's shut.
These are going to last until October, the earliest. People would have been hoping they'd be over in a fortnight. It's quite tough to think they've got another month maybe of lockdown.
We're not sure whether it'll be a month. We're saying 2 to 3 weeks because we need to see the incidences come down and we need to monitor that. It will be reviewed on a daily basis. So as we see the data coming through from Public Health Wales and our colleagues in the Health Board, we will be looking at that and then assessing the situation.
Philippa, thank you very much indeed. Well, there we go, Andrea. Caerphilly's been in lockdown, 10 minutes? There's a few more weeks to go yet, and all eyes on the rest of Wales too.
Hannah, thank you.
Welsh red meat farmers say their livelihoods will be decimated if an Australian free trade agreement goes ahead. The UK government has been meeting today to discuss the deal, which they say will include protections for farmers. But as people across Wales who work in the car and aviation industries are dealing with job losses in their sectors following Brexit and COVID, our Rural Affairs correspondent Hannah Thomas is finding out why farmers feel they have a case for particular protection. Hannah, what's the mood among farmers then?
I think it's safe to say very glum indeed. And it's not just been the weather here in Rhyddyfelin and across Wales that's been stormy today. There's also storm clouds gathering over this prospect of a free trade agreement with Australia. Farmers fear that Britain could be flooded with imports of Australian beef and lamb. And if they're priced out of that domestic market, what could happen to these traditional small Welsh family hill farms like I visited today?
Jonathan Huntley farms 60 head of cattle in the hills above Rhyddyfelin. The miserable May weather is a world away from the sunny skies of Australia, but it means his cows can graze on grass, like most beef farms in Wales.
We've got a family farm here. There's a husband and wife team. My son is 21. He wants to come into the business. We're looking long term, and we want to thrive and we want to go on.
So he wants farming protected in future trade deals.
Lots of people are still on furlough at the moment. People in the car industry, the aviation industry, worried about their jobs. Why should agriculture get special protection?
Hopefully, post-pandemic, this will be a temporary measure and those jobs will come back. The concern we've got here is if there is an open access to the UK market for beef and lamb from Australia, it'll have a permanent effect on the home market and we simply won't be able to produce the product that the British public wants to buy. It'll put us under such financial constraints that we will not be able to come back.
So why could Australian beef be cheaper? Well, it's the biggest exporter of beef in the world. It exports nearly 10 times more beef than the UK. And the average beef farm in Australia has 10,000 cattle. The average herd size in the UK is fewer than 30. So those economies of scale mean the cost of producing beef in Australia is much lower than in Britain. But striking new trade deals was surely part of leaving the European Union.
Many farmers voted for Brexit. Is this what they wanted?
Look, I've got some friends who voted for Brexit. I've got some friends that were ardent Remainers. That ship has sailed. We've had the decision and we respect that. What we're talking about here is a trade deal that respects our production standards, our environmental standards, our animal welfare standards, and doesn't see them undermined,
Well, according to the UK government, they won't be.
The Department for International Trade says that any deal they sign with Australia will include protections for the agriculture industry here and will not undercut UK farmers or compromise their high standards. They say they'll continue to work closely with the industry and keep them involved throughout the process.
Farmers say the green grass of home and their system of rearing livestock is kinder to both animal and planet, so it should never be lost.
Well, in fact, it's not just farmers who are of that view tonight. RSPCA Cymru has voiced its concerns and says the timing of this free trade agreement with Australia could be a cruel twist for food production and farm animal welfare standards in Wales. And I think there's a feeling tonight, actually, John, that if it's the first deal struck with Australia, the first one we've had, the new one, if you like, that wasn't a rollover from what we had when we were inside the European Union, then it could set a precedent for future trade deals. So we must get it right.
OK, difficult times. Hannah in Pontypridd, thanks very much indeed.